Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the absolute boom that is the international medical tourism industry. Every single year, hundreds of thousands of people are packing their bags and crossing borders in pursuit of a physical transformation. We're talking about everything from hair transplants to breast augmentations and even really complex weight loss surgeries. And places like Turkey? Well, they've become massive hubs for this, pulling in customers with these all-inclusive, budget-friendly packages that promise that flawless look so many people dream of. But here's the thing we really need to talk about. Chasing that perfect figure at a deeply discounted price, it can sometimes lead to unimaginable, lifelong consequences.
Just listen to these words: new year, new life, new body. My flights are booked, I'm ready. That was 20-year-old Morgan Ribeiro. She was a young woman from South London who had struggled with her weight for a long time. And honestly, she just wanted to put an end to years of bullying. Facing this massive 2-year waiting list for surgery through her local health system, she ended up finding an ad online. She actually posted a video to her TikTok followers radiating excitement right before flying out to Turkey for a deeply discounted gastric sleeve surgery. For her, it was a fresh start. A new year, a new life.
But Morgan's dream quickly turned into an absolute nightmare. Just days after her operation, even though she was complaining of really persistent pain, she was discharged. And on her flight back to London, she collapsed. The plane literally had to make an emergency landing in Serbia. That's where doctors discovered that her small intestine had been damaged during the procedure in Istanbul. It wasn't just a minor mistake. It led to a profound infection. And tragically, she died from septicemia.
Section 1. The human cost.
The harsh reality is that Morgan's story is unfortunately not an isolated incident. There is a very real, very heavy human toll attached to the unregulated side of this industry. Take 33-year-old Sarah Platt. She flew to Antalya, Turkey for a tummy tuck and breast surgery. And it's wild how rapidly the standard of care deteriorated for her. Imagine this. She hasn't even seen a doctor at her facility yet. She's literally just arriving at her hotel, and payment is immediately demanded. Fast forward to after her surgery, her wounds simply aren't healing, but she gets discharged and sent back to the hotel anyway. She's vomiting, passing out from the pain, and noticing the literal smell of rotting flesh. When she frantically messaged the clinic on WhatsApp asking when her bandages would be changed, they casually told her just to leave them on. She was essentially left to rot in a hotel room for 28 days.
Thankfully, Sarah survived the septic shock and severe tissue necrosis, but the aftermath? It's been grueling. Turning back the clock to repair severe tissue loss is incredibly complex. Sarah has had to endure 9 separate reconstructive surgeries back home in Wales just trying to return to some kind of normal life. Today, she's suing that clinic for damages. And get this, she even attends UK medical fairs with a hidden camera to confront industry reps face-to-face about their practices.
Section 2. The business model. Scaling surgery.
Okay, let's zoom out from these micro-tragedies for a second and examine the massive macroeconomic engine that's actually driving this boom. To understand these failures, you have to look at the sheer scale of the whole operation. 1.5 million. That's the number of international patients who visited Turkey for medical treatments in 2023 alone. It's a colossal billion-dollar business pumping crucial funds into the local economy. And look, to be completely fair and objective here, it's vital to note that the vast majority of these treatments go off without a hitch. A lot of clinics and doctors in Turkey have world-class reputations, and most patients fly home perfectly happy without a single complication.
But then we have to look at the other side of the data. Over the past 5 years, at least 28 British women have died following cosmetic surgeries in Turkey. As this fiercely competitive market grows, it naturally attracts some pretty ruthless business people who are more than happy to cut corners. And sure, 28 might seem like a small drop in a bucket of 1.5 million, but every single one of those numbers is a preventable tragedy. It highlights a massive systemic flaw in how some of these budget clinics are operating.
Which brings us to Section 3, the ghost agency model.
So, how exactly are patients ending up in these fatal situations? Well, we need to look at the deceptive pipeline they're funneled through. First, a patient is targeted with a super polished, very convincing ad on social media. Next, they book an all-inclusive package, flights, hotels, surgery, the whole shebang, through an agency that often brands itself as being based somewhere in Europe to project safety and prestige. Then, the patient flies out, only to be met by a completely unfamiliar doctor, often operating out of a rented room in a totally different clinic. These intermediary agencies act as a giant buffer. They completely separate the consumer from the actual medical provider until the literal moment it's time for the scalpel.
And you won't believe how flimsy this facade actually is. Going back to Morgan's story for a moment, She booked her package through a company called Global Medical Care. Online, they advertised themselves as the #1 agency in Europe, based out of Switzerland. She totally thought she was playing it safe by using a prestigious Swiss firm. But when investigators dug into it, that agency turned out to be literally nothing more than a name on a mailbox in a Zurich rental property. No bustling office, no medical professionals, just a forwarding address.
Adding to that absurdity is the bait and switch that happens once you're actually on the ground. When Morgan arrived at the clinic in Istanbul, which by the way was already known on local message boards for irregular employee pay and terrible reviews, she was handed over to a doctor she'd never even spoken to. And it gets worse. The doctor she was paired with to perform a highly complex gastric sleeve surgery was actively and aggressively marketing himself online as a specialist in hemorrhoid treatments. I mean, the mismatch in medical expertise there is just staggering.
Section 4. The accountability void.
So this leads us to a massive legal question. When a patient dies or is severely disfigured, who takes the blame? In this shadow industry, there is an absolute accountability void. It's just a perfect circle of finger-pointing. If you ask the clinic director where the botched surgery happened, they'll say, hey, the doctor isn't ours, we only rent them the operating room. You ask the intermediary agency, they just dispute the clinic's version of events. And if you actually track down the surgeon, they claim any accusation of malpractice is just straight-up slander. Because of this totally fragmented, outsourced structure, nobody takes legal responsibility when things go horribly wrong.
Now, we really do have to look at both sides of this objectively. On one hand, patient advocates point out deeply unethical sales tactics, like hidden cameras at a UK medical fair caught a clinic rep actively pushing a risky gastric balloon procedure onto a woman whose BMI was only 29. That is completely below the medically recommended threshold for that surgery. On the flip side, Turkish industry reps argue that the consumers are the reckless ones. They insist that patients get so blinded by these dirt-cheap price tags that they actively ignore the red flags. They argue people just fail to check if their doctor is actually European board certified or officially accredited for international health tourism.
Section 5. Pushback and regulation.
So with injuries piling up, we are finally seeing a multi-front pushback to fix this broken system. Some British politicians are proposing outright bans on internet advertising for medical tourism altogether. Over in the courts, victims are banding together. There's a British-Turkish lawyer named Berku Orhan who is currently managing 28 ongoing cross-border lawsuits, navigating the absolute headache of suing foreign clinics. But honestly, the most interesting solution right now is the demand for mandatory insurance for these intermediary ghost agencies. Legal professionals are arguing that if you force these agencies to hold strict liability insurance, the financial pressure will finally force them to properly vet their surgeons. It hits them in the wallet, cutting the bad actors right out of the pipeline.
Before we wrap this up, it's so important to ground all these statistics and business models and legal battles back into the human loss at the center of this. Morgan's mother, Erin Gibson, said it best. She said she deserved to be beautiful and feel beautiful without stigma, without being bullied. She hadn't even begun to live life yet. She was so full of promise. It's just a heartbreaking reminder that behind every single medical tourist statistic is a real person who's simply seeking confidence and a better life.
And that really is the core dilemma of this entire boom. It leaves us with this final lingering thought to explore. When the price of physical perfection is a bargain basement deal, who ultimately pays the true cost? Is it the patient, their grieving families, or a health system left to pick up the pieces?